Imogen Atkins and welcome to my channel. This is my first video. As you can see, I am a massive true crime and makeup lover, I suppose you could call it. So I thought let's try and combine the two together and see what I can create. Obviously I've got a full face already done, however maybe in the future I'll be able to do my makeup while doing true crime stories, but I thought that might be a little bit too complicated at the moment, so I was like, okay, let's do the makeup before and then read the true crime story. As I said, my name's Imogen Atkins, I am 25 years old and I am from England. So that's just like a summary of what I'll be doing. I'm hoping to upload every week and I hope you guys enjoy. So today's case, or this week's case, is on Mary Bell, the child killer. So I wasn't too sure on this case. I'd heard the name but I didn't know anything about it, to be honest, which was quite shocking because I know quite a lot about true crime. But yeah, as I was going through it and researching it and more was coming out, I was just like, okay, we're doing this case, all right? So Mary Flora Bell was born on the 16th of May 1957 to her mother Betty McCricket. It was unsure on who Mary Bell's father was, but it is thought to believe it was Billy Bell, who Betty married, I was going to say, a couple of weeks after Mary was born. So Mary grew up believing that Billy Bell was her father, but there are no sources that can confirm this at the moment, or at least no sources that I could find to confirm that Billy was indeed Mary's father. Now, Mary did not have the best upbringing at all. Betty was known to have mental illnesses, she was an alcoholic, and she was also a prostitute. And sadly, Mary got the back end of this, just the worst end, as you could say. Mary would be left alone in her house for weeks and weeks on end, and she would literally be left to fend for herself as such. I think one source said the longest she was left was 6 weeks, and she was only 5 years old, which, you know, you just, I don't know one parent that could be okay with that, but that's sadly the parent Betty was. There are reports that Mary was also abused physically, mentally, emotionally by her mother, and there were also reports that Mary was abused sexually by her possible father, Billy Bell, and also by Betty's customers. So the men would come into their home, but Betty would, you know, do her job, and then they would also sadly involve Mary as well. Now, there had also been reports and sources that stated that Betty would sometimes try and hurt Mary and possibly kill her and pan it off as an accident. I did read on one source, although I couldn't confirm it, that she was thinking give her a load of sleeping pills enough to kill her, and would say Mary accidentally took these pills, she didn't know what they were. So unfortunately, Betty does not win Mother of the Year award. Going quickly back to Mary's possible father, Billy Bell, he also abused her, which I said previously, sexually, physically, and he was also an alcoholic. So Mary had these two parents that I don't want to call them parents because I don't see that as good parenting. I feel like they have to earn to be a parent, and she just did not have a good start from the go. So that is the debate of whether that is what led to Mary becoming a serial killer. It was also reported that Mary had a friend, and she actually saw her friend get hit by a bus and die from a really young age, like 7 or 8. So you can't like imagine how traumatizing that would be. So not only are you being abused physically and sexually by the two people that are meant to protect you the most, you've also now seen death. And I feel like kids, obviously they understand death, they say, oh, they're in heaven now, but they don't understand it how we understand it. They don't experience the loss and the trauma. So to see your friend die like in that way as well by a bus, from such a young age, I can't imagine how scarring that would be and how that would take away maybe your fear of death, your emotion. I feel like it would just strip you bare, and that's how Mary was described. Mary was always been known to be a pretty young girl. She had lovely brown hair and bright blue eyes and was very intelligent. But family members, friends and teachers noticed that she just didn't care for others. She just didn't have that personality and that love going for her. She just kind of like a robot inside. She just did not care for those things at all. Now, in Mary's school in Newcastle, which I believe is called Forest Hill Primary School now, or it was on the same road as that end in Newcastle, they did not have a good relationship with Mary. Like I said already, the teachers and her classmates would recognise that there's just something not right there, and I would hope in these days that the teachers would do more to investigate, and they'd speak to the parents and they'd check out your home life. But in the late 50s and early 60s, that didn't really happen. So sadly, I feel like Mary was suffering inside, but she would never want anyone to know. So she had to almost be the bully. You know how the person who gets bullied becomes the bully? I feel like this is the situation. So she had no control at home whatsoever. So she took her control at school. So Mary had probably only one friend, and this was Norma Bell. Now, although they have the same last name, there is no relation at all between them. Norma was a couple of years older, I believe 2 or 3 years older than Mary. However, Norma had learning difficulties, so her mind was believed to be younger, and she would follow Mary's lead. So Mary was in charge. This was her control over Norma. So whether you actually see them as friends or not, I'm not sure, but she would lead Norma into these things, and they were also next door neighbours as well. So the first incident to happen was on the 11th of May 1968, when Mary was just 10, almost turning 11. Mary and Norma were walking down the street, I presume, and see a little 3-year-old boy. And they say to this boy, let's go to the sweet shop. So they go to the sweet shop, and then nothing really happened until the next day. People on the street, and eventually the police were called, saw the 3-year-old boy walking, and he was completely dazed. He had blood on him, presumed to be his own blood, and he didn't have a clue what happened, where he was, and he was out of it. So like I said, the police were involved, and they had witnesses that had seen this boy with Mary and Norma at the sweet shop, but the police did nothing about it, which I suppose they had nothing to go off. This boy was only 3 years old. They can't really explain like how we could, what had happened, so they just kind of left it. Now the next incident literally happened the day after this incident with the 3-year-old at the shop. It was at school, and Mary and Norma were caught pinning a girl down in a sandpit. I believe Norma was holding her down. Probably, I'm guessing, was told by Mary to do this. And Mary was stuffing sand into her mouth and was suffocating her with the sand, and also trying to strangle her as well. Obviously the teachers came along and like probably went into panic mode, and they took Mary and Norma off this girl. Luckily the girl survived and had no serious injuries, and again the police were called. And again, what was done? Nothing was done. They believed it was just a playground fight between little kids, and nothing serious was coming from it. Now I feel like if this was an adult, we'd be like, come on police, like what do you mean nothing was done? But Mary is 10, 11 years old at this point. And back then, what really could they have done to stop this? So a couple of weeks later, on the 25th of May, 4-year-old Martin was playing with his friends in an abandoned house. So there was this place where they lived called Rat Alley, and basically they'd been demolishing houses, but because it was like the poor area, they were taking their time. So like abandoned and half demolished houses were just left, and obviously the kids would go and play in them. So this is where Martin and his friends were playing on that day. Around 5 p.m, Martin's mother was notified by a neighbour that Martin had been in a serious accident. When Martin's mother arrived at the scene, she saw a crowd of people outside the house and one man sobbing, holding Martin dead in his arms. He was pronounced dead at the hospital, but according to sources that I've read, Martin was dead as soon as he was found, instantly. So Martin's mother was like obviously devastated. I mean, can you imagine, like, 4-year-old losing him and having no idea why or how? So Martin was found laying down dead on the floor of this abandoned house, and next to him was an empty pill bottle. However, the pathologist could not determine the cause of death, and it was classed as an accident, which again, now I think they would have had a lot more resources to find out the cause of death. But this is 60 years ago, and sadly it was just pronounced as an accident. And Martin's mother did believe at the time, and so did everybody else, that it was an accident. People didn't want to believe that someone would come into this poor street of people that knows everybody, like, you know, where everyone knows everyone, and attack or hurt a 4-year-old boy. Like, people just didn't want to believe that, so they believed it was an accident. 2 days after this, the police were called for the break-in at a nursery, and as they got into the nursery, there were notes stuck up on the walls, I believe, or just like left around so people could definitely see them, saying horrible things. One said, "We murder, watch out," and the other one said, "We did kill Martin." So again, you'd think, wow, like, this is so mucked up. Like, they are almost bragging and showing off with these notes that they had killed this 4-year-old boy. But the police thought, this is probably just children, like, playing with us, messing around. We're not going to acknowledge it. And this annoyed me. Like, come on. Like, I know that this is a hard case and this is a long time ago, but you'd think they'd look into it a little bit. But straight away they were like, this is kids, like teenagers or something, trying to pull our leg or something. So I was just like, ugh. Like, so many things could have been stopped if the police got the hint sooner, or got at least try to get the hint sooner. Like, cases like this really annoy me, where things could have been stopped and prevented by the police just ignoring massive facts right in front of them. Also, in Mary's schoolbook, she had drawn a body or a boy laying on the floor with a picture of tablets next to the body, and she'd actually written out the word tablets, and her teachers thought it was nothing. They saw it and just thought it was an innocent kid's drawing, which again really annoys me. Now, a few days after Martin's death, Mary and Norma actually went to Martin's mother's house to ask if they could see Martin. Now, Martin's mother probably thought they're kids, they don't understand, like, he's actually gone, and she explained this to Mary and Norma, and Mary and Norma's reaction was, "We know he's dead. We want to see his body in the coffin. We want to see him dead." And Martin's mother, obviously we would all have the same reaction, was completely distressed and just slammed the door in the two girls' faces. And that's just something that really stuck with me. Like, they, obviously we'll get into it a bit more further in the video, but they just have this like intriguement about death. Like, it's just weird and it's creepy. 2 months later, on the 21st of July, 3-year-old Brian was joining the other kids in playing in the abandoned houses in Rat Alley. Now, Mary and Norma happened to be there playing as well, and they managed to convince Brian to go play on a nearby wasteland to go play with them. Sadly, this time was the last time that anyone saw Brian alive. The police came that same night. I'm not sure if they were called or they happened to be in the area, but they found Brian's body spread out naked on this wasteland. Sadly, bits of his hair had been cut and he had indents which looked like to be made from scissors or something down his legs, and his private area had also been attempted to be destroyed as well. The post-mortem results revealed that Brian died of strangulation, and all the marks that were on his legs were actually made after he died, and they were carvings of initials, and the two letters were M and N, which I'm guessing by now you've probably guessed that was Mary and Norma. So due to the similarities between this death, Brian's death, and Martin's death, the police decided to link the two together because everyone in the community and the police just couldn't believe that a 4-year-old and a 3-year-old in the space of 2 months had been killed, and that just had to be a link. So the police announced to the public that a child serial killer was on the loose, and that is what they were now looking for. Not only this, but Mary was seen boasting on the school playground that she had actually killed Martin and Brian, and that she has now strangled 2 boys and got away with it. Obviously, the children and the teachers picked up on this and the police got involved. My guess is the police were called by a witness. They went to Mary's house to try and speak to her, but Billy Bell would not let them in and threatened the police and chased the police away with his dog. So the police had no choice at that time to walk away from Mary's house. The police needed more proof. They couldn't just go in and speak to Mary, especially as her dad wasn't allowing her to. So they needed a breakthrough, and luckily they got this breakthrough. There was a witness that saw Mary and Norma take 3-year-old Brian to the wasteland where his body was found. Now, this witness was a 9-year-old, but was thought to have had learning difficulties, but he described in the best way that he could that Mary was giving 3-year-old Brian a neck massage until it all went away and went silent. So with this information, the police could go to Mary and talk to her, not necessarily arrest her, but talk to her, but they couldn't do that without the help of Dr. Monica Robotham. And I probably said that wrong, but she was there because obviously Mary's age was 11 years old and they needed someone to communicate to her that this is really, really serious. The doctor actually reported that she came across really tough, but she could tell that something was like inside of her. And I briefly mentioned that earlier, that I honestly think that she was suffering so much inside that she put on this really tough front to have her control, sadly. They also spoke to Norma that evening, and Norma and Mary both denied having anything to do with either murders. And sadly, all the police had was circumstantial evidence and one eyewitness, and they needed more. That night, they didn't get released home, but they did get put into care. I couldn't find out if it's like the care we have now, but I'm guessing it was just like housing for overnight while the police continued their investigation. Luckily, the police had another breakthrough. The scissors were actually found that were made to carve in the initials to Brian's legs. These were found in the wasteland not far from where Brian had been found, and these scissors linked back to Mary. Then the teachers were like, oh, hold on, Mary drew this picture of Martin and the pill bottle, and eventually took it to police, and police were shocked because the biggest thing was it had not been released to the public or to anybody that the pill pot was next to Martin when he was found dead. That was not public information, so how would Mary know this? So this was what they had, and it was enough to arrest Mary and Norma. On the 8th of August, both girls were arrested with the murder of Brian and Martin. The girls were separated, so they couldn't be together, and Mary actually undertook a mental health assessment at a hospital at this time. It wasn't until the 5th of December that the trial began, and Mary the whole time completely denied anything to do with it, anything at all. And Norma was very upset and confused. Due to their ages, the BBC and the ITV obviously put a stop to any news in their news bulletins at the time because of how young they were and how sensitive this topic and case was, and how uncommon this case was. For not only was there a child serial killer, but the serial killer was a child. Articles were released after the trial, and eyewitnesses said Mary literally showed no emotion at all, no remorse, no emotion to the families that were there, just nothing. She never admitted it, and she was just a blank face. Mary's health results came back, and she was diagnosed with psychopathic tendencies and a danger to society. Now, given this degree of mental health, Mary was charged with 2 accounts of manslaughter instead of murder. However, was given life in prison, which was a big shock. This girl is 11 years old, but you'll see things can change. I couldn't find out exactly what had happened to Norma. Obviously she was involved with the murders, but I'm guessing they did a mental health assessment on there, and they realised that Mary was the ringleader of this and Norma just followed along. So Norma was charged but was released and acquitted on these charges, but I couldn't really find more information. I was trying super hard to find out what happened to Norma, but that is the last I could find of her. In 1969, Mary was sent to Red Bank Secure School, which is in Lancashire, and she apparently flourished there and she spent, I think, 6 years there, and she flourished and she learned so much, and she kind of changed. I guess when you are 11, you're not fully grown and you haven't fully learned the way of the world, so I guess this school that she was at, they saw her grow and learn. While Mary was in prison, it was reported that her mother Betty would visit her, but Mary was so resentful of her mother and the relationship was really based on resent. Mary was reported to write letters to Betty which were blaming her mother and begging her mother to go to the judge and the court and say, this was my fault, I raised this girl in a certain way, or you could say, some could say, like, not raised her in any good way at all, and as a result of her childhood, this is what caused her to be in prison. The whole time that Mary was in prison, she never admitted to any of these crimes, and she always denied any guilt. She showed no remorse, and there was no, responsibility there whatsoever. Now, it was reported that in 1977, Mary and another girl actually managed to escape prison for 48 hours to spend time with a man, and there were articles out there. I couldn't find sources to actually confirm this story and whether it was just a thing for the papers, but that is something that I thought we have to add, because though you would think that anyone that escaped prison would then end up serving more time for escaping, she actually got released when she was only 23. So altogether, Mary Flora Bell only spent 12 years in prison. According to sources, Mary Bell was no further threat to the public. Now, I can see why people completely disagree with this and why people agree, and people like me who are just stuck, because she murdered 2 people with her bare hands and spent 12 years in prison and got to live like the rest of her life free. But at the same time, others argue she was 10-11 years old when she was committing these crimes, and because of her childhood, as I was saying earlier, that is the reason why. And when she was in learning school and prison, she learned that this wasn't okay, but she had never learned anything else, so that is why she committed these murders. Not long after prison, Mary actually became a mother herself and gave birth to a daughter. Now, way in the future, in 2003, they were granted to be anonymous to the public for the rest of their life by the High Court. Again, some people agree with this. They agree that Mary was too young when all this happened and she and her daughter deserve a chance of normality. However, the witnesses and who were around that time and the family of the lost ones, Brian and Martin's family, strongly disagree with this and think that there's no way that they deserve immunity and to be anonymous to the public. So that is the case of Mary Flora Bell. I personally think that she wasn't given a fair start in life, but I don't necessarily know if that gives the right to murder, and murder in such a cold-hearted way and such a young age. But I want to hear what you guys think, whether you think that, you know, Norma should have served time, or Mary should have been in there for the rest of their life, or if they deserve to be anonymous to the public now. I want to know your guys' opinions. So yeah, thank you guys for watching so much. I'm sorry if I rambled. I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm gonna get better, I can promise you that. And tune in for next time. Thank you. Bye.